The number one thing that I've seen that holds people back is their inability to go deep with themselves. And that might sound kind of like woo-woo-y, but again, like, I think sales is such an inner game. And like we talked about previously, it's not just the skill set. You know, you can know all the scripts. You can give two different sales reps like the same exact script. But from my experience, when I've seen the sales rep that can actually like go deep with themselves, is self-aware, right? That can read a prospect because they've done the work on themselves, they're going to perform at the highest level.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining the Sales Journeyman podcast. And if you are watching on YouTube, can you please do me a favor, smash the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. That would greatly help the channel. It would greatly support me. I'd really appreciate it. Today, we are joined by Joe Coss. He has 10 plus years in personal mindset / sales development. He's coached over 1,000 plus people around personal development and mindset and their sales career development. He's generated about $5 million in revenue across 3 different industries. He's got a 40% close rate. And he's invested personally over $100,000 into personal development and growth over the last 10 years. Not only is he a kick-ass salesman, but he is one of the toughest dudes that I know. He's a former varsity and high school collegiate wrestler with over 300 career wins in competition. He's a Jiu-Jitsu pro belt, and he is a club wrestling coach. And I have never tapped him out. I have never even had I've probably had maybe like 4 seconds of anything that was like even in neutral position and rolling with him. So Joe, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you having me, man. Excited to be here.
Beautiful, beautiful. I do remember the first time I met you, we were in jiu-jitsu school together. And I remember you were still a white belt, quote unquote. And I was a white belt. So I remember I was like sizing you up. I was like, well, he's big. He looks strong. Maybe I can do something to him. Who knows? And then as we're rolling, I saw you rolling with a purple belt and you put them in a perfect bow and arrow choke. And I was like, there's no freaking way I have any hope of doing anything to this guy whatsoever.
That's awesome, man.
Joe, could you help me kind of understand? Because again, there's a lot of high ticket offers out there. It seems for the last like 5 years, high ticket has been like a real explosion into the marketplace. There's people giving out all kinds of offers. Can you kind of help us define what high ticket is and what qualifies as a high ticket opportunity?
Yeah. High ticket closing. It's helping someone make a confident decision that can meaningfully change their life or their business. You know, it's typically anything in the range. The offer could be anywhere in the range of like 3K upwards to like 20, 25K. I've seen some higher, but it's usually going to fall in that range. And typically it's all remote. I've seen some companies out there that, you know, they'll do some in-person stuff, but it's typically all remotely done.
And then like, as far as opportunities, it does feel like a lot of people put out like opportunities, right? Like I'm seeing, just being in the sales game, my Instagram is just flooded with the algorithm of like sales things. When people are looking for high ticket opportunities, let's say they're in a salary role and they're looking to maybe transition into something a little bit more, you know, a little bit more remote, a little bit more flexible. What should people look for in high ticket opportunities to know like what's a good opportunity and what's kind of, to use the perverted word, scam? You know, how can people kind of navigate that territory?
I think that's such an awesome question because, you know, everybody and their mother in the algorithm is marketing. You can make 40 grand doing this, 20 grand doing this, right? But I think the most important things to look out for is a few things. Number one is like, do you align with that creator, that owner, and that influencer? Like, is that the person that you respect and look up to? That's a really easy way to sniff out if an opportunity to work with somebody is legit or not. And the second thing is like, do you align with the offer? You know, I see, I've trained a lot of people in the space and I see a lot of people get on offers or part of with companies that they don't really align with what they're selling. They don't really feel and have that conviction in it. And it's not really serving people at the highest level. And so really easy way to sniff it out is just those two things to make sure that you're working with somebody who operates from a place of integrity and you are aligning energetically and, you know, with your morals and your values with that offer. I think those are the two most important things to sniff it out.
Yeah, it's crazy you say that, right? Because I was having a conversation with one of my sales friends this like about a month ago, and he was having problems with objections, and I was like, okay, well, tell me why you rather tell me why you would buy this product. And his honest answer was, I don't know. And I was like, well, that's something you need to either dig deep and find a reason, or maybe it's not time for you to consider a new role because, like you said, do you align with the offer? Do you align with the product? Do you know that the product is at least good? You know, if you don't
Exactly.
know that the product is good, you're never going to ever have that same confidence, and people will sniff that out of you. They'll know, like, this guy is bullshitting me right now. He's telling me something that, frankly, he doesn't even believe he can deliver on. You know what I mean?
That's exactly right. And that's why I have so much conviction in what I do because, I remember 7 years ago, I hired my first coach. So I did something similar to like what we train people in our offer here. I did it, for I was running a few franchises and I hired a coach to help me grow and scale, and he doubled my revenue. It was one of the best investment I ever made. And so I think when someone can speak from that integrity experience and they have that conviction in your offer, like you're talking about, I think that's what makes the biggest difference for somebody's journey in sales or remote closing or any industry for that matter.
Yeah, and I kind of want to dive a little bit more into that. I think because I'll be the controversial one here. Okay. And I have said that I'm a fan of this person. So do not come at me. Right. But there's a really famous influencer. Her name's Shelby Sapp. Right. And again, I love Shelby Sapp. Like I really do. I think she's incredible. I think she's great. But she's famously kind of had an Instagram video where she said, in order to succeed in sales, you have to be a psychopath. And I get what you're thinking, right? Because you do have to have this innate ability to handle rejection at such a high level that like you kind of have to just be a little bit crazy. But I think that's always kind of, I don't know. I don't love the wording there. And again, she's 5,000 times more successful than me. Again, she's probably even right. I'm probably wrong, right? But what are your, because kind of like, again, like we talk about aligning with your offer, aligning with your product, right? What are kind of maybe your thoughts on that? Like, do you really have to be somewhat freaking crazy to be successful in this industry? What level of empathy do you need to have? Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's all contextual, right? It comes down to the offer. So like Shelby, she's a fantastic marketer. I've watched her for a long time and she has some good stuff out there. Do I align with everything that she teaches? Not particularly, because I think it's all based on what offer you're selling. And she's typically working and helping people get into high ticket remote sales, right? So she can be a little bit more, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but a little bit of brash, like the pink Rolls Royce or whatever she has, right? And like all that stuff. And I respect it. And her skill set. But again, that type of mentality or sales tactics that she may use, it may not, and I watched you talk about this in one of your videos, it's not going to necessarily work in like a B2B setting, or it's not going to work in a direct sales setting exactly, right? It's going to all vary on context. But to answer the second part of your question around like the mindset, and it's funny because I know exactly what video you're talking about, and I saw that and I was like, man, this is pretty wild to say. But I almost, and maybe this is just the wrestler in me, I almost agree with it, and I remember for the longest time I had a quote on one of my social media pages, and it was by a guy named Les Gutches. And he was a famous wrestler. I don't remember what country he's from, but he beat, I don't know if you know Cael Sanderson,
yes,
the famous wrestler. He beat Cael Sanderson. Wow. And one of his quotes was, I was only happy when I was miserable. And that was one of the quotes. And I still get goosebumps to this day when I say that to myself, like just now, because I thrive when I'm uncomfortable. Like it just gets me excited. Like even talking to you about it. And I think that's why I love jiu-jitsu and sales and business so much, because like when you kind of have that mindset of like Shelby calls it the psychopathic mindset, or, I might call it more of like the, I don't really have a name for it, but like, I think when you step into that alter ego or into that uncomfortability and that like just getting it done, like whatever you got to do to make it happen, And it makes it fun, because I treat sales and business kind of like a game. And so it gamifies it for me, and it just gives me more of that like push, especially like, as you know, right? We have those lulls and those rough days and those tough quarters or whatever the case may be. Again, to bring a full circle on your question, I don't 100% disagree with her. I kind of like her on that mindset in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. Like my favorite sale I've ever made in my career was when I was like really first in sales. I was on a PIP and I was about to get fired because I sucked. Like I was terrible in the beginning. And I literally like went through 6 weeks without closing anything. And I saw a guy that was telling me that I was working with, I was doing B2B sales. He was telling me he was going to give me a shot. He was going to give me an opportunity, and he never did. And I just couldn't figure out like why. And I saw this guy's LinkedIn talking crap about me specifically on LinkedIn, not by name, but I knew he was talking about me. And so I called him on his cell phone, not my business phone. And I just said, "Hey, sir, I won't use his name. Why are you talking shit about me on LinkedIn?" And this guy was like a high driver persona, skeptic persona, very Kevin O'Leary, very like bold. When I said that to him though, I could hear him start to choke. And I closed that deal, and it was only like $300 for the first sale, right? Which is like nothing. Like, let's be honest, that's literally like a coffee for business. But I was so proud because it broke my streak. But you're right. Like, I agree with you on that sense, right? There was so much pain that had to get me to a point where I had to stop being timid and just that, because I never ever would have said that to anybody. And my manager eventually found out, and it was a problem. But like, it was something I needed to do. I'm not saying you should now go on all your calls and start cussing people out and telling them if anyone listening, I'm not saying that was the right thing to do, but in that moment, that's what I needed to do for myself, at least, and for nothing else. So
yeah,
I kind of agree.
100%.
I can kind of see that perspective for sure.
And that's what I respect and like a lot about you. And dude, I love your content because you're very self-aware, right? You understand, like, it's like, I'm going to butcher one of your quotes I heard in one of your trainings, but like you talked about, like, it's like a dog eat dog world kind of thing when it comes to sales, right? And I think a lot of times people, they think it's just the skill set. And yes, it is. Of course, it's the frameworks, it's the skills, but it's also like, just like that example you shared there is like the mentality, the mindset, like the willingness to do things that I imagine it was probably really uncomfortable for you. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you were fine with it, but at the same time, it's like, I think that's what makes you so good at what you do.
No, I appreciate that, Joe, for sure. I think that and I think going back to kind of what you said, it does depend, right? Like, you sell high ticket coaching. I know there's a lot of probably competition out there, but like, I feel like each coach has something unique, and so it's going to be different. Whereas if you're coming up selling commodities, like if you're selling, like I used to sell pottery, right? Like I used to sell pottery to garden centers, right? That was a supply for garden centers. There's only so much shelf space that people have. So whatever you sell, like the reality is like, that's one other thing your competitor can't sell. And now the medical industry, where I sell incontinence, it's like, it's like they're not going to use 7 different brands. They're going to use either your brand or another brand. So you kind of have to have that mentality. It doesn't necessarily mean that mentality is going to be in every industry and everything, but like when you have something that's very generic, you're going to have life insurance, right? Like, people are only going to have one life insurance policy.
That's exactly right.
They're not going to have like 7 different life insurance policies. They're going to have one. And I guess Shelby is right, man. The more we talk about this, the more and more I'm becoming convinced that maybe I'm just being a pansy about that wording. I think and she is down, right? So Shelby Sapp, well, I'm sorry for disagreeing with you in every way.
Yeah, and I watched your S tier or your tier list video, and again, kind of just reiterating what you just got done saying, but it's like, it's all contextual, like what works in Jeremy Miner's training may not exactly work for a certain industry, or Patrick Bet-David insurance. It's not gonna, or Shelby Sapp may not apply, but we know them for a reason, And so, 100%.
Yeah, and that's also why, like, one guy who gets a lot of crap is Andy Elliott, right? Like, that's one guy who people just love to thrash him online. But honestly, I love it. I like it's like I love to an extent. I somewhat hate what it. I have a love hate relationship with it, right? To some extent, I
Yeah.
love that like driven like let's get it done, yeah, let's close deals, right? But like again, I'm not gonna do that to a
For
grandma
sure.
and trying to sell a final expense policy too either. I think that's pretty great. And I think one thing I wanted to kind of talk to you about, just have because we kind of have this shared experience is jiu-jitsu versus wrestling, right? Like that's kind of where I think people fall. Whereas like wrestling, it's about expressing your will on someone else and pinning them to the ground. Whereas jiu-jitsu is somewhat about flowing with what opportunities are going to be given to you. Where have you seen, like, as far as the marriage between your martial arts background and also being able to apply some of the things you've learned in wrestling and jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and all these things to the business and the sales world? What are some perspectives you have on that?
The biggest perspective, and it's crazy that you asked this question because I was just reading this long post earlier today around, what wrestling can do for somebody out after it, and even martial arts, right? Because in wrestling, the biggest thing that I got and have been able to apply to like anything sales and business was just like the grit. It's just regardless of what happens, we're going to make it work. Regardless of what goes on, we're going to make results happen, by force and by will. But when I started doing jiu-jitsu, as you can't always force everything, right? It has to, jiu-jitsu is called the gentle art, right? And the best practitioners are the ones who can like set traps. And so what I've gotten from like combining the two and like really applied it into the sales world specifically is regardless of what happens, like I'm going to make it work, but I'm not going to force this prospect, right? I'm not going to force this person to bend to my will, right? Because as you know, in sales, like if you have to pressure somebody, you're probably doing something wrong. You miss something in the discovery, or you're not really listening to that person. So jiu-jitsu's actually really calmed me down a ton. So that way, and it's interesting, like my income grew once I started doing more jiu-jitsu because I understood I needed the energy. It's like the masculine and the feminine energy. I think anybody in business, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this too, I think we need a little bit of both. I think we need to have the healthy balance of the masculine energy, and we need to have the healthy balance of feminine energy. When I was coming up in business, and I had a 100-person sales team at one point early on in my career, and I had a really hard. I really had a higher churn rate than I really wanted, and I realized because I was so much in my masculine. But then once I started being able to step more into that energy of just allowing things to flow, knowing that God is going to give me what I want or something better, right? Things are always working out in my favor. And I really just started letting go and being detached in the process. So much like Jiu-Jitsu teaches us, I was really able to not only make more income, but just kind of like have more fun and relax and kind of take that chill pill. So long answer to your short question, but that's been the biggest thing that I've learned. And that's why I'm really grateful for having wrestling as the base personally, and then adding jiu-jitsu on the top, because it transfers so much over into what we do in business and sales and in coaching and anything.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you, and we're both people of faith. So I know I can say this, and I would say this regardless. I don't really care. But I think that like, when I think about like who I want to be as a salesperson, like I was sitting down at Christmas at church and just listening to like my pastor preach. And it's like, it kind of clicked in my head, like Jesus really is the perfect role model, even for sales. And I know that sounds very prosperity gospel, like cheesy, corny. But when you think about it, like Jesus would go to the Pharisees and would just absolutely own them in any argument and drive them away. And he was willing to say the things that to people that they weren't even willing to say. Like even Nicodemus, he's like, listen, dude, like you're a teacher of Israel and you don't understand this. How do you not understand this? Right. Very tough to say, but it's what Nicodemus probably need to hear. And yet he's also the person that like people who are needy and in need come to. He's a person that attracts the people who are in need. And he also is willing to have the hard conversations. In one scene, he's driving people out of the temple with a whip. And then in another scene, children are coming to him and sitting with him and learning from him. And so like one thing I've been really getting into in sales, like just kind of wanting to study on my own, is like personas, right? Like I'm at this level now, like I want to understand the deeper psychology. It's a real thing that we've kind of been talking about this whole entire time. It's like everybody has a different persona. There are some people, they want the facts now and they want to hear about it now. And those people, they're in their masculine, whether they're a male or woman, they're in that masculine sort of energy of like, I want to know now and I want to know big things and I want to conquer. And the details don't matter as much. And then there are some people that are really soft spoken. They're really kind of nervous. And are they're very analytical. And what I have found in my career is that, you know, the drivers and the enthusiasts, they're the easiest to close, the hardest to keep, right? They'll spend 1,000, 2,000, 10 grand with you. That's not a lot of money to them just to test you out. But if you don't perform, if your operations aren't where they need to be, and as a sales rep, that's not always in your control, but as an entrepreneur, that is in your control. If your operations aren't where they need to be, they're going to leave and you'll never get a shot with them again. Whereas the more timid, maybe analytical, soft, they're not as easy to close. But when you close them, you have them for life, right? And I have to consider that again as someone who's sold products that would be considered commoditized. The sale isn't the first sale. The sale is how many reorders can you get from them in a year?
Yep.
That's the real sale. So I have to be very mindful of not just can I close them, but can I keep them? Whereas maybe someone in a high ticket sales maybe doesn't have to worry about that as much because maybe they just blow the 10 grand and they're like, okay, well, that was just lost money, whatever, you still get paid. So you got to kind of know, you have to know your game and understand what is the nature of what's going to make you the most amount of money. So I always have to consider, even when if I get what it feels like a lay down sale, did I really secure that person?
Yeah.
And that might be, you know, that person who's a driver, who's aggressive. It's going to be more than one conversation, even if they're ordering, because just as fast as they ordered from me, they're going to order from Bob down the street, and they're going to order from Susan down the street, and they're going to order from big companies and small companies. They'll do that. And I know that because being a purchaser myself, that's exactly how I did things. I would give a shot all the time. It's like, prove your value to me. I have no problem. I'll spend this money on you. If you screw up, you're done. Like, I just won't use you again. And so you're going around thinking to your friends and to your teammates, I just got a $3,000 sale, but that's the only sale you're going to get if you don't perform.
Right.
So that's kind of where I've really developed, like, my thinking is thinking more like an entrepreneur down the road than thinking like just a simple salesperson, if that makes any sense.
100%. You're thinking longer, right? And that's a big thing is, like, I think the longer we can think, the higher our income is able to.
Absolutely. No, I think that's great. So kind of going through a little bit more discussion high ticket. So high ticket, in your opinion, anything from 2,500 to 40,000, you know, or 2,500 plus could be. I don't know if people are doing $100,000 sales. That'd be crazy. Sure, I'm sure there's someone out there.
I've seen in high tickets 80K.
80K, offers. Really?
That's the highest. I've
heard of 25,000. I haven't heard of 80K. What are some of the attributes that you see having trained people? What are some of the attributes in whether it's a sales rep or even if it's personal coaching for entrepreneurs? What are some attributes that you have found in the people that are successful with these programs? And then maybe what are some bad attributes that kind of hinder people's success, whether it's high ticket, whether it's business entrepreneur or any sale that you've ever seen?
Now you asking more of like, hey, what do I see? Like the best closers, sales reps that sell high ticket, what are the best attributes, or clients?
You know what, let's do sales reps and then let's talk clients. Let's talk both. Let's start with the sales rep when they're in the high ticket program. But I do think there's probably an application to clients of any program, because what's going to make you successful in one deal is going to make you successful really anywhere. That's
exactly correct. I would say, and I love this question, and because I've had hours of conversations with my coaches and our offer owner around this, like trying to figure out like, well, what's the, you know, because we've brought on closers before that crushed it in sales previously in other industries, but then they step into like high ticket and they don't perform. And the number one thing that I've seen that holds people back is their inability to go deep with themselves. And that might sound kind of like woo-woo-y, right? But again, like, I think sales is such an inner game. And like we talked about previously, it's not just the skill set. You know, you can know all the scripts. You can give two different sales reps like the same exact script. But from my experience, when I've seen the sales rep that can actually like go deep with themselves, is self-aware, right? That can read a prospect because they've done the work on themselves. They're going to perform at the highest level. So that's the biggest thing that I've seen, because we've hired closers and I've seen closers and other offers, and I'm in a couple of masterminds for, high ticket closing and coaching as well. And every time I see somebody not work out or not perform, it's because they just lack the ability to go deep with themselves. They stay too surface level. In high ticket, like if you're going to have a conversation with somebody on Zoom to spend $5,000, $7,000, $10,000, $15,000, you have to be able to build trust. You have to be able to listen to what they're saying. It's a different energy than when you're in person. I don't know if you're in person consistently, but it's a different energy than when you're in person. And so there's a lot of other attributes that I've seen, but that's the first and the most important one, because I've seen the most successful coaches and most successful sales reps in high ticket. Every single one of them shares that attribute, being able to go deep with themselves. They've done the work on themselves, right? It doesn't mean they've spent $50,000, $100,000 on like coaching and all that stuff necessarily, but they've done the work, right? They're self-aware. They know where their limitations are. They know what they need to work on. They know where their holes in the boat are. And you know this, right? Like if you have a boat and you have holes in it, even if they're small, right, it may not be a big deal, but if we're not working on plugging those up, eventually it's going to grow. It's going to overflow. It's kind of like kicking ice cubes under the fridge. You can do that, but eventually there's going to be a puddle. Right. So the sales reps that I've seen that have the ability to like work on themselves, go deep, that's the number one, in my opinion, in the high ticket space. That's the number one attribute that they need to focus on. Outside of, of course, the grit and the skill set and the frameworks and all those things. That's the biggest thing that I've seen.
So what do you do if you're a sales rep and you start to do this inner work, really evaluate what's inside of you, and you find that you don't like what's inside of you? Where do you go from there?
Yeah. Well, what we resist persists. And so I think the first time we go deep with ourselves, like, if we're, the first time, like, for example, first time I gave my life to Christ, like I had to like go in and really like face the hard things about me that I didn't align with, right? Like we all have that, or when we go and do the inner work, if we're not speaking on a faith base, right? And we like start like being self-aware around where we fall, where our limitations are. Most people tend to run away from them. So if we're, you have somebody who's just starting to do, I don't know, let's just say someone starts doing meditation. They start actually sitting still with themselves, right? And they start letting things come up from maybe childhood trauma or whatever the case may be. It's most people's inclination to, this is scary. I have fear. Let me run away. But fear is the only emotion that gets smaller as we move closer towards it. But most people think it's the opposite. As woo-woo-y as it might sound, I think when we take the moment to just face it, sit with it, allow ourselves to sit with the uncomfortability of whatever comes up that we may not like, it's crazy. I've found many times that it's not as bad. And it gets better with time, the more and more we do. It's just like a muscle, right? It's developing anything.
Yeah.
And so that's not like the sexy pill answer, right? I've been asked that question before, and people are like, well, is there a secret? And yes, there's other tools that we can use, of course, but it all starts with just facing it and allowing it to sit, because what we resist persists.
Yeah. I think that's a great quote, because I think that's something that I'm very passionate about, because I do think that the sales influencer sort of sphere is kind of perfectionistic. And I would even use the term legalistic, in the sense that everything that you see, everyone that presents their best self on social media, and I do it too. Like, well, I'm not going to tell you all my dirty laundry on social media, but believe me, it's there. Right.
Yeah.
And I think as well, kind of piggybacking what you said, just the acknowledgement that you're the type of person who is facing your demons is something to give you confidence. Even if you haven't fully conquered your demons or whatever it is, right? If you're the person who's facing it and you're confronting it. Because I always thought, like, when people start talking about inner game, I was always like, that's nonsense. That's dumb. That is a sales rep trying to add crap to the deal to sound like it's better, but
Yeah.
it's really fluff. But I think
Yeah.
this year, just going through what I've been through this year, I've really started to realize, like, no, it really does. And I think your quote on fear is fantastic. Fear is the only emotion that shrinks as you get closer to it. One other thing I think about fear is the worst emotional disposition to try to do anything with. It's fear can sometimes, like, it gives you a fake strength sometimes, right? Like, I suffer from anxiety all the time, right? I come from a very anxious family. I suffer from anxiety. And sometimes my anxiety drives me to do more and make that one more call, like one more thing.
Yes.
But the quality of what I'm putting out there isn't good when I'm anxious. People can sense that. People can sense, like, when you need this deal to go through, and sometimes you're there. I just gave the story about I was there at times, and there are times still too where, like, I really need this deal to go through because I really need this. When people can sense that, it's like they don't want anything to do with you because you're giving that.
Yep.
But if you can, like, be at peace in the middle of a storm, that's true strength, in my opinion. That's not when everything is going well, when you've got all the savings in the bank account, you've got the Rolls Royce, you've got everything.
Yep.
But when, like, life is falling apart, but you can find that peace, that's, like, where, like, real power and real conviction, I think, personally stems from.
100%. You know, because I'm a believer that neediness is creepiness.
Yes.
Right. And so, like you just said, like, people can feel energy, whether you're on Zoom or in person, they can feel when you need something. But, you know, I always approach any conversation, like even this podcast or any sales call, I like to follow an acronym. You might have heard of this before, maybe in a different way. It's called HILA, and it stands for high intention, low attachment. Right? So anytime I am entering any sort of conversation of influence, right, whether it's coaching, wrestling, or sales or whatever, I have an intention of, hey, I want to serve this person, or I want to be a vessel for them. I want to solve their problem, but I don't need it. Right? I'm detached from this outcome. And I think when it comes to the sales process, that's why I always start with, like, hey, you got to work on yourself first. Because when you continue to focus on yourself, then you can go into the second attribute, which is, like, being grounded regardless of what's going on. Because people can feel that as well. And, you know, and as far as tactics go, like, if I'm entering into a sales conversation, like, I'm always expecting an objection or two, and then I'm going to close. I think where most people mess up is, like, we get really excited as sales reps, and maybe you did this when you were new. I definitely did this when I was newer in sales, is I get really excited. Like, it seems like the prospect's all in. My energy's all high. I'm like, yes, this is great. And then I drop the price, and then their energy drops. Because people, you know this, like, they get this, like, reptilian brain when they hear money, right? And they forget it's almost like people get amnesia sometimes when you're selling. It's like they forget everything you just told them and how it's perfect for them because they're just focused on the number. But then the sales reps who, then their energy's high and their energy drops because the prospect drops, then you lose the deal. You lose the sale, right? But I think the best sales reps are the ones who can maintain that neutral energy. And when a prospect's all frazzled or they're like, let me think about it, blah, 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 and you can be grounded and isolate and lead them through the sale and lead them to making a decision that's best for them and what's going to get them from point A to point B. I think that's where we can make the biggest difference. That's where commissions can increase. That's where close rate can increase because we're doing the work not just tactfully, but also the regulation on ourselves so that we can lead someone with power, right? And lead somebody with integrity. So I love everything you said there around all that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, right? Because that's the moment too where, like, I would notice when I would drop a price, I would already, even before I drop the price, I would start to feel anxious, right? And I would start to feel like, okay, here it comes. It's $10,000. And, like, I even probably put some of that baggage on them before dropping the price, because even my tone, even my pace, everything starts to change because you're getting nervous. You're afraid of what's about to happen. But I personally, like, the one objection handling style I love the most is, have you heard of Matthew Ryder?
Yeah, I've heard of him. I'm not familiar with his work, but I've heard of him.
To me, like, his objection handling, in my opinion, is the best. I've stolen it. It works across industries, whether it's B2B, whether it's B2C. because it's just like drop the price and say, hey, how do you want to proceed? And you're ready. You're already ready. You know that you dropped it. You're asking how they want to proceed. You're not adding any stress to them, right? They might say,
Nice.
okay, yeah, well, how do you take payment, right? And that it might be that simple. But you also are now opening up the discussion to continue instead of shutting it down. And that's the thing, like I've learned in sales, is like, don't ever shut down the prospect. I told a story in I have an objection handling video on YouTube and on the podcast. You can listen to it back if you're listening to this. But I told the story of once there was a product I wanted, and the sales rep handled all of my objections so perfectly that it actually turned me away because it was so scripted, it was so rehearsed, and I didn't feel heard. Right.
Yes.
And that's where I felt like you're just selling me and you're not helping me. Instead of just saying, okay, well, that price is that, let's talk about maybe some other options. Let's educate you on maybe some things we talked about, or let's remind you about some of the things we talked about in Discovery. You said that if this doesn't happen, then, you won't have more time to spend with your kids. Like what happens if you keep doing the same thing and you keep missing out on time with your kids? Yeah, that's right. I did say that. Oh, but if you're just anxious all the time, like, then like you're just going to pass that along. And if you can't think straight of these normal things, like under pressure, people tend to fold and people tend to change. So if you can have that, I think that's really good advice as well.
Yeah. And I love that you said that guy almost kind of turned you away because it was so perfect, and I think today in this market, people are much more sophisticated, may not be the right way to describe it, but more educated, like back in the early 2000s, like you can kind of say whatever you wanted, and there was no ChatGPT, there's no Google. People just weren't educated buyers. Now everyone's educated. People know, right? Like I sell to salespeople all the time. I sell to CEOs and people who know the game. So I think the more we can just be human, and for me, like, especially when I enter into objection handling, I just want to have an open and honest conversation with somebody. Like I want to help them see, because I think the guy that you're referencing, I saw one of your videos where you talked about objections are usually either one or two categories. It's either logistical or it's fear, uncertainty. And I agree. Like it's either like, hey, we got to figure out how to make this work financially together, or you feel uncertain about something. And I think when you can just have a open and honest conversation with somebody, and I think the old school ABC, we all know, Glengarry Ross, I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, always be closing,
always
right?
Be closing.
Always be
Leads
closing.
are weak.
Yeah. Copies for closing.
Yeah.
For me, something that's really helped my close rate a ton is, I learned this from one of my coaches about 2 years ago. I use an acronym called ABD, and that stands for always be disarming. Because today people they know, and so for me, again, I want to help people lower their guards. I want to get on the same side of the table as them, right, and help them see why their fear is a lie. Right? Because again, if it's fear, it's a lie, right? And help guide them and show them why what I have to offer can help them get from point A to point B. And if it can't, okay, like how can we figure this out together so that you can get the result that you want, even if it's not with us, And I think when we operate from that energy, and I think we're both on the same page around that, I think it makes the process more fun, but also, of course, the more people we're helping, easier it is for us to grow our business and elevate too.
Yeah. And I understand for the rep that's listening to this, like, again, because I've been there, you're down and out, you need commission, you have a kid, you have a wife who's staying at home or a girlfriend or whatever. When I started sales, I had it was the middle of COVID. I had a wife who was a stay-at-home mom. I had my first child, and my wife's grandmother was living with us, and I was a sole provider for everybody. I understand maybe that for the person listening, you're hearing detach and you don't know how. But like we kind of said before, right? When you can detach in the middle of a storm, you have so much power. And you want to know what's a weird trick I do? And this works so well. I tell people why the reasons that the product isn't the greatest. Hey, you know what? This is the problems you're going to face. Here's this problem. Here's this hurdle. I pre-prep them, because if you just try to sell someone something like this coaching program is going to make you $40,000 a year. Well, maybe if you actually use it and you actually commit to whatever we're talking about and you're willing to commit, are you ready to make a change? Because if you're not ready to make a change, it's not going to work, right? When you talk to people in that way, that does help. Or I'm not saying unsell yourself, but like, know the weaknesses of whatever product or service or offer that you have. Like, there's no offer is ever going to be perfect, right? If you as a rep are constantly thinking of the imperfections of your product, like that's not a weakness necessarily. You have to understand the weaknesses and the strengths, because if you understand the weaknesses, you can emphasize on the weaknesses. Like right now, I have a marketing agency where I try to sell leads to people. Is every lead gonna be a close? No, there's no way.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
But everyone's gonna tell you that their leads are gonna make you a bazillionaire. And we all know that's not true. We all know there's going to be a lead who entered a form who didn't even know what they were entering, and they're not going to remember what they entered, even if you call them a minute after. Like, that's always going to happen. But as long as I'm the one who's giving you the truth, I challenge you to go to any other agency and see if they'll be as honest with you, and be prepared to be despaired, because they're not going to give you the truth. So being able to like lead with truth and honesty, like that builds so much trust by being able to say like, no, this isn't going to be perfect. Like you're going to buy a car. There's going to be something about the car that in 6 months you're going to realize you don't love. You're going to buy a house. There's going to be something in 6 months you're going to realize you don't love so much. That's the nature of commerce. And if you can lead with maybe some of the flaws, like people will trust you more than if you just always try to have this like perfect world around every single element of what you offer.
Yep. I 100% agree.
Awesome. Well, Joe, I think we're coming closer to the end for sure. This has been obviously a fantastic podcast. We definitely have to do this again for sure. Tell the people now how they can connect with you. What are the best channels they can kind of follow you on to kind of get, if they want to work with you, if they want to try to maybe get involved in high ticket coaching that you're offering, or to work with you particularly as a coach? What are some of the ways they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, man. Best way is on Instagram at Joe Coss, JCOSS. Send me a DM. Let's have a conversation. This is the best way to get a hold of me.
Perfect. Well, guys, Joe's Instagram is going to be in the description below. Definitely check that out. Also, if you guys need leads, like I mentioned, send an email to rob@vinnermarketing.com. With all that said, I hope that this was a blessing to you. I know this was a blessing to me. Keep selling. And if you're watching on YouTube, once again, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much, Joe, for coming on.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Hi, guys. Keep selling.